When I walked into the parking lot after my shift, the spot where my car was supposed to be was empty. At first, I thought it had been towed. Then I checked my phone and saw a message that made my stomach drop. My father had co-signed the loan when I bought that car. While I was at work, he sold it to pay off one of his gambling debts. In that moment, standing in an empty parking space with my phone in my hand, something inside me shifted. I realized the person I thought I could rely on wasn't the person standing in front of me anymore. That day didn't just take away my car, it changed the way I saw my father, my family, and the responsibility I had to take for my own life from that point forward. I was 24 when I bought the Camry. Not new. A 2019 with 61,000 miles on it. Midnight black metallic, cloth interior. A small scratch above the rear left wheel well that the dealer had disclosed upfront. I had been saving for 2 years, setting aside a portion of every paycheck in a separate account I labeled car fund, and tried not to look at too often because looking at it made the growing feel slow. I had ridden the bus to my CNA certification classes. I had ridden the bus to my first job at the nursing home in Garner. I had coordinated my entire life around the route maps and the schedules and the unpredictable reality of public transit in a city that was built for people who own cars, and I had done it without complaining because complaining was not going to make the buses run better or more often. When I finally had enough for a down payment, $4,500, more than I had ever had in one place at one time in my life, I went to look at cars on a Saturday morning in February with my friend Simone and her older brother Deshaun, who knows enough about cars that I trusted him to tell me if something was wrong that I would not see myself. We spent 6 hours at 3 different lots. We test drove 4 cars. Deshaun looked under hoods and at brake lines and at the undercarriages in the way he had learned to do over years of buying used vehicles and regretting some of the ones he hadn't looked at carefully enough. The Camry was at the 3rd lot. I sat in the driver's seat and put my hands on the wheel and felt something I can only describe as rightness, not luxury, not showiness, just the solid, reliable feeling of a car that had been built to last and had been kept reasonably well by the person who owned it before me. This one, I told Deshaun. He looked at it for another 20 minutes, checked everything twice, and said, "Yeah, this one." I drove it off the lot 2 weeks later after the financing was settled, and I sat in the parking lot of my apartment building for 15 minutes before going inside, not because anything was wrong, because I wanted to stay in that moment a little longer, the moment of having done something I had worked toward for 2 years, of having a key in my hand that belonged to something that was mine. I was 24 years old, and I had my first car, and I thought, this is what it feels like when things go in the right direction. My credit score at 24 was 589. I know this number precisely because I checked it approximately 14 times over the course of my car search, watching it update, willing it to be higher. Learning enough about credit scoring during those months to understand exactly what had happened to it and what it would take to rebuild. What had happened to it was a medical bill from when I was 22, uninsured, working part-time, and not yet covered through my employer. An visit for a kidney infection that I had waited too long on because visits were expensive and I was hoping whatever it was would resolve on its own. It did not resolve on its own. The bill was $2,300. I had made a payment arrangement and then had some months where the arrangement was harder to keep than I'd expected. And one late payment had become 2, and I had spent the next year paying off the full amount, but the damage to my credit was already done. $589 is enough to get a loan. The interest rate it gets you is not kind. The loan officer at the credit union, a patient woman named Karen, who did not make me feel embarrassed about the number, explained that with a co-signer who had substantially stronger credit, the rate could drop by nearly 6 percentage points, which on a used car loan over 5 years represented real money. Money I could put toward my actual life instead of toward interest. My father's credit score was 768. He owned his house and had paid his mortgage on time for 19 years. He had no credit card debt that I knew of. He had a stable job at the county water authority where he had worked for over 2 decades. On paper, he was exactly what the loan needed. I asked him on a Sunday afternoon at his kitchen table over the coffee he always has ready when I come over, regardless of the time of day. I explained the whole situation, the score, the rate difference, what co-signing meant, and what the loan officer had said about it. I had printed out a 1-page summary because I wanted him to have something to look at, because I wanted the conversation to be real and clear and not something either of us would misremember later. He looked at the paper. He looked at me. He said, "How much are the payments?" $264 a month, I said. "I've run the numbers. I can cover them without any problem." He nodded once, the way he nods when he has made up his mind. "Okay," he said. "I'll sign." "Dad, I need you to understand what it means that—" "Jade," he said, and he said my name the way he says it when he wants me to stop explaining and hear him. "You're my daughter." "Of course I'll sign," I thanked him. "I meant it completely. Let me tell you who my father was before I tell you who he turned out to also be, because I think both things need to be true at the same time or the story doesn't make sense. His name is Walter. He is 59 years old. He grew up in Durham in a house with 4 siblings and a mother who worked 2 jobs and a father who worked 1 job and still sometimes came up short. He learned early that things that mattered required work and that work was not something you complained about. He passed this on to me in ways both direct and indirect, in the things he said and in the way he lived, the example of a man who showed up consistently for the people who depended on him. He raised me with my mother until I was 12, and after my mother moved to Phoenix to be closer to her sister, he raised me alone. He came to everything. Every school play, every track meet, every event at my high school where parents were invited. He was the kind of father whose presence you could count on, and I had been counting on it my entire life. When I got my CNA certification, he took me to dinner at the nicest restaurant I had ever been to at that point in my life, and he looked at me across the table and said, "You're going to keep going, aren't you? You're not going to stop here." "No," I said, "I'm not going to stop here." "Good," he said, "because you're capable of whatever comes next." He said things like this, not frequently because he is not an effusive man, but at the moments when they mattered most, he said them like he meant them, and he always had, as far as I knew, meant them. I trusted him the way I trusted my own memory of my childhood. Not critically, not conditionally. Simply the way you trust the people who built the foundation of who you are. I was going to have to learn the difference between trusting someone's love and trusting their judgment. I did not know yet that these were different things. Looking back now, I can see the signs that were there. I want to be honest about this. I am not going to tell you I was completely blindsided, because the full truth includes the things I chose not to look at directly. The first one I remember was the Christmas I was 17. My father had been talking since October about a gift he was planning for me. Not the specific gift, just the general energy of it, the way he mentioned it twice in passing with a kind of lightness that told me he was looking forward to giving it. I had been careful not to ask too much, not to build up too specific an expectation, but I had built an expectation. Christmas morning, the gift was a gift card. A $50 gift card to a store I liked, purchased thoughtfully, wrapped in nice paper. A perfectly good gift. And something in his face when I opened it, a brief look that was there and then managed away, told me it was not the gift he had been planning in October. I said it was perfect, and I meant it, and we did not talk about it. There was a spring when I was 20, visiting from community college, when I heard him on the phone in his bedroom with the door not quite closed. The tone of the conversation was the tone you use when you owe someone something and they are not in a patient mood. I stood in the hallway and I heard, "I told you I'd have it by Friday." I said Friday. I went back to the living room and turned the TV on, and when he came out 10 minutes later, I was watching something I could not have told you the name of. He said it was a billing dispute with the cable company, resolved. I had my Aunt Frances on my mother's side, and she mentioned once, tangentially, that Walter had asked to borrow money from my mother's brother years ago, and had paid it back slowly. She said this without weight as information, and I filed it the same way. These are the signs I am telling you about because they were there, and because I want to be truthful. But they were also, individually, the kinds of things that have other explanations. And I had chosen the other explanations for 24 years because they were easier, and because I loved him. The habit of choosing the easier explanation ends when you walk into a parking lot and your car is gone. $264, due on the 18th of every month. I set up autopay from my checking account 2 days after I bought the car, because I was not going to be the person who forgot or who let anything slip. The loan was in my name as the primary borrower, which meant it was building my credit every on-time payment, a small brick in the wall I was rebuilding. I tracked this. I checked my credit score at the end of each month, the way some people check their weight, with a combination of discipline and hope, watching the number move. By the time the car was gone, my credit score was 641, 52 points in 14 months. I know this number too precisely because it mattered to me in a way that is hard to explain to someone who has never had to think about credit as a survival mechanism. Every point was a month of showing up. The payment history was perfect. 14 months, 14 payments, every single one on time, every single one from my own account. Money I earned working 8-hour shifts in a hospital that smelled like antiseptic and effort. My father's name was on the loan in the way that a structure has a support, visible in the documentation, there for the load-bearing function. Not something you think about on any given ordinary Tuesday because the structure is standing and you are living your life inside it. I thought about this later, about what it meant to have someone's name on something that belonged to you and what vulnerability that created. The kind of vulnerability you accept because trust is supposed to mean it doesn't matter. Trust is supposed to mean it doesn't matter. I had believed this. The Tuesday it happened was the kind of day I would not have remembered if nothing unusual had followed it. I was up at 5:15. My alarm goes off at 5:15 on the days I have the 6 a.m. shift, which I had taken on voluntarily because the 6 a.m. differential adds a small amount per hour to my base pay, and I was saving toward my LPN certification program. I ate a granola bar standing at my kitchen counter, the same thing I eat most mornings when I don't have time for anything else. I filled my water bottle. I put on the scrubs I had laid out the night before, the dark blue ones, the ones that still look presentable after washing, and my work sneakers and my badge lanyard. I drove to work in the dark, which I have always found peaceful rather than lonely. The roads quiet in the way they only are before 6, the streetlights still on. My patient assignment that day was 4 residents in the memory care wing, all 4 of them people I had been working with long enough to know their rhythms, their preferences, what kind of morning they were likely to have based on how they had been the previous day. This is the part of my work that I don't talk about much outside of it because it's hard to explain to people who haven't done it. The particular intimacy of caring for someone who may not know your name, but who responds to your presence in a way that tells you the care is landing, that it matters, that you are doing something real. I ate lunch in the break room with my coworker Priya, who was telling me about a trip she was planning for the summer. I had a turkey sandwich and an apple. I finished my shift at 2:30 because I had come in at 6, clocked out, took off my badge, put my personal things in my bag. I walked out into the parking lot at 4 after signing out some paperwork that had needed my attention before I left. Everything that happened before that parking lot was an ordinary day. I want you to know that because I think it matters. The ordinariness of the before, the way nothing announces itself. The second row, 4th from the left. I have a habit of noting my parking spot when I arrive somewhere, repeating it to myself once, 2nd row, 4th left, so that I don't have the experience of walking a parking lot looking for my car. I developed this habit because I spent enough time doing exactly that in my early driving years, and I found it irritating enough to fix. So I knew where I had parked. I was not confused about the row. The space was empty. I stood at the edge of it and I did the inventory that your brain does automatically. Yellow lines on either side, undisturbed, no broken glass, no debris, nothing that indicated any incident in the space. Just empty concrete where my black Camry had been at 5:47 that morning when I pulled in and got out and walked toward the entrance. I walked the entire lot. I do not know exactly how long this took. The lot was not enormous, but I was thorough because I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to come around a row and see my car and feel the specific relief of someone who overreacted. I did not find my car. I came back to the space and stood in it. This is an odd thing to do, and I was aware of it being odd, but I did it anyway. Stood in the yellow lines of my own empty parking space, and I looked at my phone. The towing company confirmed nothing. The text from my father at 1:47 said, "Hey sweetheart, call me when you're off. I need to talk to you about something." "It's okay. Don't worry." I read it standing in the parking space. The April air was cool in the way April air is cool when the sun is still up, but the temperature has already started dropping toward evening. I remembered this detail, the specific temperature of the air on my arms, because I remember everything about that few minutes in the way you remember the minutes that divide your life into before and after. Don't worry. I thought about calling him, and I made a decision, without fully articulating the decision to myself, to call Simone first. I think this was protective. I think some part of me knew that if I called my father first, I would hear something that could not be unheard. And I needed 1 minute more in the version of my life that existed before I heard it. So I called Simone. She answered on the second ring, and I told her what I was standing in, and she said, "Oh, Jade," in the way she said it. And I said, "What do I do?" And she said, "You need to call him. And Jade, be somewhere you can sit down first." I found a bench near the lot entrance. I sat down. I called my father. He answered before the second ring. This told me something. People who are waiting for a call they are dreading and a call they are prepared for both answer quickly. The speed of his answer told me he had been holding his phone. "Hey, sweetheart," he said. "Dad," I said. "My car isn't in the parking lot." A pause. I counted it. 1 beat, 2 beats. "I know," he said, "those 2 words, I know. I have replayed them more times than I can count in the months since that phone call. And each time they land the same way, with a thud, the thud of confirmation, the specific weight of being told that what you feared is real." "You know," I said, "baby, I need you to let me explain. Where is my car?" Another pause, shorter this time. I had to sell it. I held my phone and looked at the parking lot entrance and at the street beyond it, and at the ordinary Tuesday afternoon continuing around me as if nothing had happened. Cars passing, a woman with a stroller on the sidewalk, a delivery truck turning the corner. "You had to sell it," I said. "I got into some trouble," he said. "The kind of trouble that I needed to handle fast. I needed cash today, Jade. Today. And I didn't. How did you get my car, Dad?" The pause this time was longer than the others. "I still have a spare key," he said. "From when you left one here last summer. I had left a spare key at his house last August when I had gone out of town for a weekend and asked him to start the car once while I was away to keep the battery from draining. I had left it in the ceramic dish by his front door. I had not thought about it when I came back because I had other things on my mind, and because it was a spare key at my father's house, which had seemed like exactly where a spare key was supposed to be. You went to my workplace," I said, "while I was working, and you took my car, Jade, while I was inside doing my job. You drove to my job and you took my car out of the parking lot." "I know how it sounds," he said. "How does it sound?" "Dad, tell me how it sounds." He told me everything. I will give him that. He did not make me pull it out of him piece by piece, and the part of me that was cataloging things to hold on to later noted this, that when I asked him directly, he answered directly. There was no more management of the situation after I pressed, just the truth coming out in the quiet voice of someone who has been waiting to say it. He had sold the car to a private buyer he had found through an app, $11,000. He had needed the money to pay off a debt he owed to a man who, he said, was not the kind of person who accepted delayed payment. He had gone to my workplace at approximately 11:30 in the morning, used my spare key, and driven the car to the meeting place where the transaction happened. "The title," I said. "How did you handle the title?" A pause. "My name is on it too," he said, "as co-signer." "Co-signers aren't co-owners," I said. I said this with a certainty I was not entirely sure I had. But I had read enough about the loan when I signed the documents to know that the title structure mattered, that co-signing was not the same as co-owning, and that what he had done with the title transfer was something I needed to understand in detail. "I know," he said. "Dad, did you forge my signature?" Silence. "Dad, the buyer didn't ask a lot of questions," he said. "He wanted the car. I needed the money. The title got handled." I sat on the bench outside the hospital where I had spent 8 hours taking care of other people, and I understood what my father had done. He had taken my spare key. He had gone to my workplace. He had taken my car, sold it for $11,000 to cover a gambling debt, and handled my signature on the title transfer in a way he was not describing in detail, which told me everything I needed to know about what that had looked like. He had done all of this while I was inside working. "How much do you owe?" I said. "Total," he said the number. "It was more than $11,000. So you still need more," I said. "I had to start somewhere," he said. I closed my eyes. I sat on the bench in the April afternoon, and I pressed my free hand flat against the cold metal, and I breathed. I have tried to describe this accurately to Simone and to my Aunt Frances and to the lawyer I eventually talked to, and I run into the same limitation each time. The thing that I felt in those minutes was not one feeling. There was grief, not metaphorical grief, actual grief, the same category of feeling as losing someone. Because in a real sense, I was losing someone. Not my father, not the man who raised me alone after my mother left, not the man who came to every track meet and made coffee every Sunday and told me I was capable of whatever came next, but the version of him I had believed in. The version where his name on my loan meant something, where the spare key at his house was safe, where trust was the right word for what we had. I was losing that version in real time. There was anger, and I do not need to describe this at length because you can imagine it, and because I have already said he sold my car while I was at work, and if that does not produce a self-evident anger, I cannot add to the description. There was underneath both of these something I was not expecting: clarity. A specific, cold clarity that arrived like a window being opened in a closed room. The edited version of my father, the version where the warning signs had other explanations, where the text at 147 meant something benign, where my spare key was simply my spare key, was gone, and what replaced it was a clear and complete view of the situation, my situation, what had happened to me and what it meant and what I needed to do. I had a case number. I had a loan in my name with 14 months of perfect payment history. I had a car that had been sold without my consent with what I had strong reason to believe was a forged signature on the title transfer. And I had a father who had done all of this because he was a man with a gambling problem and a debt he was afraid of, and who loved me and had raised me and had taught me to show up for the things that mattered. Both of these things were true. I sat on a bench in a hospital parking lot, and I held both of them, and I did not try to make them resolve into something simpler than they were. I did not say the things I could have said on that phone call. I want to be honest about why. It was not patience. It was not grace in the moment. It was the clarity I just described, the understanding that what I said in the next few minutes would shape what happened next, and that the things I felt most urgently were not the things that would help me in the next few minutes. I said, "I need to think." He said, "Jade, please. Dad, I need to think. I'm going to call you tomorrow. Are you okay? Do you need a ride home?" This question, "Do you need a ride home?" landed in a way I did not expect. He had taken my car and now he was asking if I needed a ride. I do not think he meant it without awareness of the irony. I think he asked because he is, underneath the problem and the thing he had done, still the person who worries about whether I have a way home. "I'll figure it out," I said. "Jade, I'll call you tomorrow," I said, and I ended the call. I sat on the bench for a while. Priya came out at some point and found me there and asked if everything was okay, and I said I was fine. I was waiting for a ride, which was partly true. She offered her own ride, and I thanked her and said I had it handled, and she looked at me for an extra moment with the particular perception of a person who has worked around enough distress to recognize when someone is managing something difficult, and then she said, "Okay, take care," and got in her car and left. I ordered an Uber. I sat in the back of it for the 12-minute ride home, and I looked out the window at the city passing, and I did not cry, which surprised me, and which I understood later as the effect of the clarity. When you know with that kind of precision what needs to happen next, there is no room for collapse. I went home. I sat down at my kitchen table. I opened my laptop. I sat at that table for 3 hours. I had a legal pad and a pen because thinking on paper has always worked better for me than thinking on a screen, and I wrote things down in the way I had learned to write things down when I was studying for my certification. The way you organize information when you need to understand it rather than just hold it. First column, facts. The loan was in my name as primary borrower. My father was co-signer, which I had confirmed in my loan documents meant he was a co-obliger, not a co-owner of the vehicle. The title in North Carolina is separate from the loan. I needed to understand exactly how the title had been structured when the car was purchased and what his name on the title actually permitted. I looked this up. I looked it up for an hour in actual North Carolina DMV documentation and in auto loan resources and in legal information sites. What I found was that the title structure mattered enormously. That in some title structures, a co-signer does have their name on the title, and some transactions require only one signature, while others require both. I did not know which structure applied to my specific title. I needed to find out, second column, what he had said. He had confirmed he took the car. He had confirmed he sold it. He had not confirmed in words that my signature had been forged, but he had confirmed that the title had been handled in a way he could not describe clearly, which was its own kind of answer. $11,000. A debt that was larger than $11,000. A buyer who did not ask a lot of questions. Third column, my options. I wrote them all down without filtering. All of them, from do nothing to call the police tonight. I wrote them because I needed to see the full range before I could figure out where I actually stood. Do nothing. I stared at this for a while. Do nothing meant my car was gone, my credit was potentially affected depending on what happened with the loan, and my father had done this thing with no consequence. Do nothing was the family option, the option of keeping peace, of absorbing damage for the sake of the relationship. I understood why it existed as an option. I also understood, sitting at my kitchen table at 8 o'clock at night, that doing nothing was not something I could do. Not because of the anger, though the anger was real. Because doing nothing would make me complicit in something I had not chosen and could not afford. Call the police tonight. At the other end, file a formal report, describe what had happened, let the system do what it does. This option was available and it was real, and I did not close it. But I did not open it without thinking about what it meant. My father, a man with a job and a paid-off house and a work record of 20-plus years. Having a police interaction over this, the specific consequences that would fall on him that I could not fully predict and that I would partly be responsible for. I was not protecting him from accountability. I want to be clear about that. I was not going to protect him from accountability, but I was going to be deliberate about what form that accountability took and what I was asking for, because I had learned something in the years I had spent building careful things, my credit, my savings, my professional trajectory, which was that being deliberate is almost always better than being reactive, even when being reactive feels like the more honest response to the feeling. Between those two columns, I wrote down a third option, and I looked at it for a long time. I wrote down a name, not a person's name, a type of person, a lawyer. I had never had a reason to have a lawyer before. I understood, looking at what I had written, that I had a reason now. I went to bed at 11. I did not sleep immediately, but I slept eventually, which surprised me, and I woke up at 6 with the clarity still intact, and I made coffee, and I made the call. I called 2 numbers that morning. The first was a legal aid organization I found through a Google search. I had not known such services existed in the accessible way they do until I went looking, and finding one felt like finding a door I had not known was there. I spoke with a paralegal named Michelle who listened to the situation without interrupting, asked 4 specific questions, and told me that what I was describing touched on both civil and potential criminal issues, and that I needed to speak with an attorney before I did anything else, including making any further statements to my father. She gave me an appointment for the next afternoon. The second call I made was to my father. I want to tell you that I had decided before I called him exactly what I was going to say and exactly what I was not going to say. I had decided this the same way I decide things for my patients, by thinking through what the actual goal is and working backwards from there. The goal was not to hurt him. The goal was not to have the conversation that expressed everything I felt. The goal was to understand what had happened and to begin the process of correcting it. He answered on the first ring. "Jade," he said, "I'm going to talk and I need you to listen without interrupting me," I said. "Can you do that?" A pause. "Yes," he said. "I know what you did. You've confirmed what you did. I'm not calling to relitigate that. I'm calling because I need to know specific things. And I need you to tell me the truth, and then I need you to understand what's going to happen next." "Okay," he said. His voice was the voice of a man who is ashamed, which I recognized because I had heard versions of it in the care setting I work in. The voice of someone who has arrived at the truth about something they did and is sitting in it. I asked him the specific questions: the name of the buyer, the dollar amount received, what exactly had been done with the title documents, whether he had the $11,000 or any portion of it. He answered all of them. The buyer's name he gave me. The amount was confirmed at $11,000. The title, he paused here. The title had been transferred with both signatures, he said, and when I asked him directly whether my signature on that document was mine, he said no. "I need you to understand something," I said, and I said this carefully because I had thought about how to say it. "What you did with my signature on that title is fraud. I'm not saying this to threaten you. I'm telling you because it's true and because you should know the name for it. A lawyer is going to tell you the same thing. You talk to a lawyer? I'm talking to one tomorrow," I said. "Before that conversation, I want to give you the opportunity to make a decision." "What kind of decision?" "I need the money back, Dad. Not all of it. I understand the situation, but I need what you have. The $1,500 you mentioned you still had access to. And I need you to make a decision about getting help. Real help. Not a decision you're making because I asked you." A decision you're making because you understand what happened when you drove to the parking lot of my workplace with my spare key. The silence on his end was long. I sat with it because the silence was not nothing. The silence was him actually hearing what I said, which I needed to happen before anything else could happen. I know what I did, he said finally. I know you do. I said, I'm going to get you the $1,500 today, he said. I need some time on the rest of it. The lawyer will help me figure out the rest of it, I said. That's what the lawyer is for. I need you to not do anything with any remaining funds while I understand what my options are. Can you give me that? Yes, he said, and Dad. I paused. I need you to go to a meeting this week, and I need you to tell me you went. A pause. You know about... I've known for a while that there's a problem. I said, I didn't know how to say that before. I'm saying it now. I'm not angry at you for having a problem. I'm angry at what the problem made you do to me. Those are different things, and I need you to understand that I'm separating them. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, You're a better person than I deserve right now. I'm your daughter, I said. That's all. I'm going to go now. The $1,500 transferred to my account 45 minutes later. The meeting with the lawyer the next afternoon took 2 hours. She was direct and specific, and she told me clearly what my legal position was, and what my options were, and what pursuing each one would likely involve. She said the title fraud was real and documentable. She said civil recovery was viable. She said criminal charges were possible, but that the decision about whether to pursue them was mine and mine alone, and that she would support whatever I decided. I took a week to decide. I did not file criminal charges. I want to explain this in a way that is honest, because I think it would be easy to read this ending as the softer choice, the choice of someone who let herself be talked out of what she was owed. It was not that. My father entered a treatment program 2 weeks after our phone call. Not Gamblers Anonymous alone, an actual outpatient treatment program with weekly sessions and a counselor and a structure I could verify because he told me about it, and because his sister Frances, who I called the following week, confirmed he had gone and was continuing to go. My lawyer helped me document everything and build a civil recovery framework. My father signed a repayment agreement, a formal one, drafted by my lawyer, witnessed, specifying the amount and the schedule and the consequences of non-payment. The amount covered the car's value minus what was recovered from the insurance claim, because it turned out there was a path through insurance that my lawyer identified that I would not have known about on my own. The monthly payments are modest, because modest is what he can sustain, and the agreement has teeth if he doesn't sustain it. I bought another car in June. A 2020 Corolla this time, silver, 49,000 miles, from a different dealer with a different finance officer and a loan in my name only. My credit score by then was 654, which is what 14 more months of perfect payment history plus the careful management of the insurance claim had produced. The rate was not great, but it was not punishing, and the car is mine in a way that is simple and unambiguous. My name and only my name on every document. I am still paying back the thing that happened to me. Not financially. The repayment agreement handles that. I mean in the other ways. The ways where you thought you knew someone and now you know them differently, and you have to figure out what the relationship is in this new knowledge. My father and I talk on the phone most Sundays. He has not missed a payment. He is still in the program. He says things to me now that he did not use to say, direct things, accountable things, the kind of things you learn to say when you are in a program that requires honesty. I listen to them, and I do not pretend they undo what happened, and I do not pretend they mean nothing. Here's what I know now that I did not know when I was 24 and trusting him with a spare key and a cosign. There are two kinds of trust, and it took this to teach me the difference. The first kind is what you feel for someone you love, the trust of the child who believes the parent is safe, the trust built through 24 years of showing up. That trust is real, and I do not dismantle it completely because doing so would require me to dismantle the truth of my own history, and I am not willing to do that. The second kind is the trust you extend in arrangements, in paperwork, in keys, in access to things that belong to you. This kind of trust is different. This kind has nothing to do with love. This kind requires evidence, not just feeling, and I had extended it based on the first kind and paid the price of confusing them. I do not leave spare keys anywhere now. I understand the specific mechanics of co-signing. I read every document not once, but until I understand it, and I ask the questions that might seem like distrust to the person watching me ask them. This is not distrust. This is clarity. I am someone who knows what it cost me to learn the difference between loving someone and trusting them with your keys, and I am not going to pay that tuition twice. The parking space at work is second row, fourth from the left. My car is there every morning when I arrive, and every afternoon when I leave. Some days I walk out to it, and I get in and I start it, and I pull out of the lot, and I do not think about any of this at all. Some days I put my hand on the door handle and I feel something. Not exactly grief, not exactly anger, something more like the permanent awareness of a person who has learned something she could not unlearn. I think about what the program taught my father, which is that you have to name the problem to begin to address it. You cannot manage around a thing and call that recovery. You have to say the name of it out loud. The problem was that I trusted someone more than the evidence supported. Not because I was stupid, because I loved him, and love makes the evidence soft around the edges. I do not love him less now. I trust the evidence more. This is not a tragedy. It is just what it cost me to become the kind of person who knows the difference. I got in my car. I drove home. The evening was ordinary in the way evenings are ordinary when the crisis has passed and what is left is just your life. Continuing, which is the best possible outcome, which is everything.